Well, it looks like Dark Souls 3 has finally come to an end for us, on PC at least. After having all the servers taken down due to the whole RCE Exploit scare, From Software has now confirmed that none of the Dark Souls games will be coming back online on PC until after Elden Ring has launched. That doesn't mean we'll never play this game again, but it does mean that Dark Souls 3 won't ever really be the most populated From Software game ever again. Someday we might come back to this game for events such as Return to Lothric, but I don't anticipate that to be anytime soon. I'm a little sad. Dark Souls 3 served us well, and I wish we could see it out in the way it deserved, but it was a good game, and now it's time for it to rest. So I had recorded an entire half of video diving into my thoughts and opinions and basically my takes about the whole RCE Exploit situation. But with the announcement that FromSoft made a couple days ago, it all seems to be kind of irrelevant. They seem to imply in the tweet that they've posted and then a subsequent Katao interview that the RCE exploit has been fixed and we won't need to worry about it at launch for Elden Ring. There were some rumors out there that Elden Ring might have to launch in offline-only mode on PC, but I don't think any of that was ever really going to be a possibility, and any worries people still have about that should be put to rest by this announcement. But I do think it's important to discuss the criticism that From Software and their publisher Bandai Namco both deserve and don't deserve for the situation that we're in the first place. JeeNine made a really great video about this a couple days ago, which you should definitely check out, but I also wanted to give you guys a bit of insight as to what this situation looks like from a dev and publisher perspective. I've heard some people criticize From Software for having this exploit in their game for over 10 years, but I think that needs a little bit of context. In an interview with Video Games Chronicle about the RCE exploit, the person who found it described From Software's online component as pasted over a single-player game, and that no thoughts are given about security. They also said that FromSoft has been making their games basically the same way since Demon's Souls. But when FromSoft was developing Demon's Souls, they were making it exclusively for the PS3, a console on which the RCE exploit can't be performed. And when FromSoft made the first Dark Souls game, they also only had the PS3 in mind, and it was only later that the game was ported in-house to PC and Xbox. As we know, those ports to Xbox and PC were incredibly rough, due in large part to the fact that they had to be handled by an internal team who had little to no experience porting games to either of those platforms. So security was not something that was ever on their mind for both of these games, and why would they be worried about exploits that were already very obscure at the time that could only be performed on other platforms? Now, should they have considered this when making Dark Souls 2 and 3? Well, yeah, probably. Should Q-Lock, the studio that handled the Dark Souls remaster, who improved the netcode in the game, also have been aware of this when they worked on Dark Souls? Also, yes. But again, RCE exploits are something that really aren't that well known, and this was probably an area that perhaps their publisher should have stepped in and said, hey, you guys don't have too many network engineers on staff, perhaps we could provide some support for that? Have you guys given any thought towards the security of your games? But it seems like that never really happened. It's important to understand that FromSoft is first and foremost an artist-driven studio, and while some may call their forays into online co-op and PvP a little bit over-ambitious, I think their ambition is what drives a lot of our passion about these games as fans. However, I do think that is what allowed this RCE exploit to exist for years and years before its recent discovery. Ultimately, I see this as an issue of priorities for FromSoft, and their priority was never going to be focused on the online portion of these games and its security, and for that I do think they deserve some criticism. I've also heard some people criticize Bandai Namco for not responding to the situation sooner, citing that they had been alerted of this issue months in advance. I don't really take this criticism seriously though, since one report from one person claiming that there's this catastrophic bug that's always been present in their games is not something that would set off alarms in a risk assessment setting. At my job, if we heard a similar report, we'd honestly just probably ignore it. And our reasoning would be as follows. How many people have been affected by this problem in the past? Well, we don't really know, but most likely a tiny handful of people, or even zero, since it seems to have been totally unknown up until now. How many players is this affecting right now? 0. Okay, so that's going to move it down our priority list. Do we know for certain that the source reporting this issue to us is reliable? Well, also no, and in order to verify this issue, we'd either need to contract a team to investigate, which is expensive, or we need to pull someone off of the Elden Ring development team, which is just not going to happen given that the game's going to launch in a very short time frame. And then ultimately, how much is this going to cost? We kind of have the same problem as we just had which is we're going to need to either contract a team or pull a team of people off of Elden Ring, which is simply not going to happen. And then we're going to need to contract QA to verify that these fixes are fixing the issue at hand and also not messing anything else up. All of that is pretty expensive. At the end of the day, the only reason Bandai Namco or From Software did anything was due to the hack during Grimm's stream, which I ultimately think was a good move because it looks like it will have paid off. RCE Exploits will not be in Elden Ring, but it comes at the cost of online servers for the Dark Souls series being down until after the launch of Elden Ring.
I did it. I did it. Killed another invader. I'll do in the fat walk.
Up until this point, it might seem like I'm just shilling for FromSoft and Bandai Namco, but I really do think they deserve a lot of criticism for never putting an actual anti-cheat in the game. FromSoft games have always been kind of the Wild West in terms of cheating. Hackers are fairly prevalent in areas with high activity on PC, and save editors aren't even properly detected and banned on consoles. We had this whole debacle with the New Game Plus scripts erasing people's progress and stunting their save files. Happened to me twice actually. We then had similar hackers injecting invalid items into players' inventories and getting them banned by the tiny amount of anti-cheat that was present in the game. Hell, I would invade players all the time who were very clearly playing the Cinders mod online, and the anti-cheat wouldn't even detect that unless they were reported by another player. The thing that got to me after a while was how prevalent the use of Cheat Engine while online became. Now, I'm not trying to shame anyone who uses Cheat Engine to create builds and unlock bonfires or host cool community events. But to me, using Cheat Engine online always seems like a bit of a slippery slope. It starts off with, oh, well, I'm going to use it to unlock my summon limit to get more invaders. But then slowly morphs into, oh, well, I'm just using it to kill every enemy in the level so that I don't have to deal with them, because that's just wasted time, even though it's clearly part of the game. It also starts off with, well, I just curse dagger bow glitchers and cheaters. And then morphs into, well, I just curse dagger shitters. Which then morphs into, well, I just curse dagger passive players. And pretty soon you're just curse daggering Kevin and his overleveled Phantom at cell level 60 because you got mad they wouldn't let you win. And the fact that you can open and use Cheat Engine while online with little to no punishment is something that's absolutely insane. The fact that the community has had to turn to very unstable mods such as Blue Sentinels just to avoid getting our characters sent into New Game Plus or curse daggered by some survivalist at Pontiff is not really acceptable from a studio with the sort of following that FromSoft has gained now. I'm glad Elden Ring will finally be using an actual anti-cheat this time around, but we shouldn't have had to wait over a decade for a From Software game to finally have an online anti-cheat, regardless of how humble FromSoft's beginnings were. For some time now, I've heard some sentiments throughout the community that Bandai should have supported DS3 for longer, due in large part to the state of the game nowadays, where clearly unintended glitches like the Estus Cancel, Unscaled Glitch, and Bow Glitch are all not only possible but also pretty common at higher levels. But for a primarily single-player game with an integrated online component, you'd think that 1 year of support, 2 DLCs, and several balancing patches accompanying those DLCs would be enough in terms of support. I have a theory as to why it wasn't really enough though, and I think it was because Dark Souls 3 was the game that kind of drove everyone in this PvP community a little bit insane. This will loop back to dev support, I promise, so just bear with me. So Dark Souls 3 drove people a little crazy when it gave hosts such a massive advantage over invaders. This was back at launch. It's a change with good intentions, trying to make sure that co-oping hosts stand some sort of a chance against invaders. But it ultimately created a class of players who hosted full-time, who cared only about winning and eking out every little advantage in order to make sure that they could hardly ever lose. In the long run, I'd say this was a pretty negative change for the community, and created a lot of toxicity among everyone who participated in PvP. Longtime Souls YouTubers and streamers declared that this game didn't give a shit about invaders, and stopped playing the game entirely. Other Souls content creators then decided they had a personal vendetta against all co-opers, acting as toxic as possible to anyone who dared play a game with their friends. Invaders were thoroughly punished for showing any sort of courtesy to co-opers, and thus would refuse to fight anyone around the bonfire entirely, always backing up into PvE to make sure they had the advantage. New players didn't understand the reason for this tentativeness on invaders' part, and felt like they were just being run around the whole level by someone who was far better at the game than them, instead of just fighting them one-on-one. And invaders were somewhat justified in that. As the old saying goes, every solo host is just a ganker who hasn't summoned yet. So this one little balancing issue, trying to make hosts a little stronger compared to invaders, creates this massive amount of toxicity that really wasn't present in past games. Another thing that drove people crazy was how long we all then proceeded to play this game. I've noticed that for many PvP players these days, Dark Souls 3 was their first Souls game, but for a lot of the older Souls content creators, FromSoft used to deliver a brand new game with brand new PvP mechanics every 1.5 to 2 years. But the combination of Sekiro not having online play at all, and Elden Ring being internally delayed for about 1.5 years, we've ended up playing this game for nearly 6 years. It'll actually have been almost exactly 5 years and 11 months between the release of Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring. In my mind, there's just no way Dark Souls 3 was a game designed to be played for 6 years, and to me it seemed like the game was really meant to be played for the same amount of time as all the other Souls games, 2, maybe 3 years at most. And if you look at when a ton of these glitches popped up, they were almost all at the end of 2019, so only a few months after Sekiro had been released. If Sekiro had been a game with PvP, would those glitches have ever become popularized? And this was the other thing, apparently a bunch of these glitches were found much earlier in this game's lifecycle, but people in the community actually kept them hidden just to wait out support from the developers. Like, can we just appreciate for a second that people decided to keep a bunch of information secret that, if fixed, would improve the game for everyone, all for the sole purpose of their own benefit? That's absolute insanity. Another aspect is that these games also got a lot more popular between Dark Souls 3 and now. In my opinion, the Souls series were pretty much considered niche up until Sekiro, which was when I felt like it was finally considered mainstream. So mainstream, in fact, to the point where I have coworkers who are much older than I am, changing their backgrounds to screenshots of Elden Ring, and actively counting down the days till Elden Ring's release in our work social chats. So Dark Souls 3 went from the third game in a pretty niche series to the last Souls game that had co-op and PvP, which is why it still had such a crazy amount of activity for these last 6 years. FromSoftware all of a sudden had more people than they ever anticipated playing this one game for far longer than they ever thought possible, and unsurprisingly, it kinda got out of hand. So this is all part of what I've been talking about. Everyone kinda went a little bit insane with this game. We've been playing a game for about twice as long as we should probably have, in a community that is more toxic towards PvP than it ever has been in the past, and now infused with a bunch of glitches that were kept secret by a bunch of people with selfish intentions that goes against the overall benefit of the community. Not only would this drive any normal person a little bit crazy, but it's also impossible to expect a developer to anticipate this level of craziness and alter their support plan ahead of time. It's unreasonable for a developer to anticipate stuff like glitch cords and people playing a fairly niche game for so long, even as the developer makes new games. That all being said, I think we should expect more support over a longer period of time from Bandai Namco and FromSoftware for Elden Ring. Using DS3's lifespan as a template, I think we'll be playing Elden Ring for quite a while too. It's been heavily rumored that FromSoft's next game is Armored Core, which is not a Souls-like in the slightest. And if people don't like its combat and PvP system, they're going to come right back to the last game, just like they did when Sekiro didn't have an online component. If that sort of situation plays out again, we're really going to need long-term support.
Oh, I thought you were dead. Oh no!
Well, now it is time to say goodbye. Not just for this video, but for Dark Souls 3 in general. I know some of you guys are just totally gleeful and happy to be done with this game, and I very much get that. Talk to me like 2 months ago, and I'd probably be of the same mind about it. But to me, this sudden, abrupt severance to other worlds leaves me feeling quite unsatisfied, and there really isn't any other recourse for that. I used to think about the final days of Dark Souls 3, how I'd have this time to gather a bunch of footage, run a few community events, and really say goodbye to this game properly. I wanted to send this beautiful game out with a bang, a last explosion of glory that would be reminiscent of a long past golden age. And in typical Dark Souls fashion, that just wasn't meant to be. And instead the game ends in relative silence, populated by those who couldn't let go. And yes, I'm talking about the private servers. Good lord, is that just a sad, awful experience. Just an absolute parody of what this game was just 1 month ago. But I think it's fitting that they're all trapped with each other, those that were not able to let go of this game and move on to the next one. Dark Souls 3 will always hold a special place in my heart. It wasn't my first Souls game, nor was it really my favorite, but it definitely was the one I had the most fun with, if that makes sense. DS3 was why I started this channel, and what I made this channel all about, and I don't think I've ever made another video about any other game on this channel. I truly cherish the memories I've made with so many of you in Lothric, and I look forward to many more memories with you all in the lands between. Well, that's it for Dark Souls 3, and it's also it for me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next game.